when I started Elevate Coaching, I knew that I had a mission to want to give back. And I think that's what made it easy to start a business is I know that foundationally, Elevate Coaching is a business to give back. One, through the knowledge that I've gained, and two, just by helping others feel as good about themselves as how I feel about myself.
Welcome to the Private Wealth Podcast, the podcast that dives into the inspiring journeys of founders, entrepreneurs, athletes, and entertainers. I'm your host, Jolene Tepedino, Client Service and Operations Director at Zelniker Dorfman Private Wealth. Through each episode, we'll explore the stories of remarkable individuals who have made significant impacts in their respective fields. From the challenges they face to the triumphs they celebrate, we'll uncover the underlying factors that fueled their success.
Oscar, for anyone that might not know you, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Oscar Franco. I am a medically retired veteran. I was in the Army for 13 years, traveled into defense contracting after I exited the military in 2020, and then I found myself in tech. So I traveled from AWS, and now I'm currently at Microsoft, where last year I decided to take another venture, still at Microsoft, but I decided to open up a coaching practice called Elevate Coaching, where I want to give back to one, my veteran community, but also help athletes and coaches who are struggling with performance develop the mindset and leadership tools in order to excel.
Amazing. That's great. So, Oscar, take us back to when you got out of the military. What was the financial reality check when the military stopped, handling everything for you?
That was difficult, if I'm being completely honest. You know, after having been in the military for 13 years, when you have a paycheck that's guaranteed on the 1st and the 15th, you know, so getting out of the military was scary. And I think one thing that the military does great is pay you on time, outside of like during budget crisis, right? Which actually I never experienced. But what they don't prepare you for is the uncertainty of getting out. You know, they really prepare you for being in for the long haul for 20 years, 20 plus years. But I think they make you feel like you have no other options while you're in the military. So getting out was very scary, very uncertain. And having to fall back on the skills that the military taught me of like being resilient, fighting through, driving to success, was the key factor in landing a role in the defense industry.
What were you taught in the military as far as financial literacy or, how to handle money? Was there any, preparation and education around that?
I would say no. The military could definitely do a better job of teaching financial literacy. You know, it was recommended, while you're in the military, like invest in your TSP or, try to get into the stock market or, any type of stocks or bonds or anything like that. Where I learned a lot of my financial literacy was from my mother. My mother immigrated here from Mexico into the U.S. in the late 80s or mid to late 80s, and she'd been a go-getter from the very beginning. And I had my first business was lawn mowing. Funny enough, at 13, but my mom made me put money aside. She made me pay taxes to her. She made me set money aside for savings like a 401k. So I learned at a very early age, like I have to pay rent, I have to pay taxes, I have to set money aside for investing. So I did that immediately when I joined the military. Like I started putting money aside. I think I started at 10%, eventually went to 15, 20. But I've kept that since I was 18 years old, to now.
That's
Wow.
awesome. Oscar, did you mentioned, some of the values that you learned from the military, right? Kind of helped you into your next career. Um, Would you say that those helped you with your money as well? I know you just mentioned that your mother taught you a lot, but do you think that some of those principles, like the discipline, like the always pushing forward, kind of helps you from a money standpoint?
I think it absolutely did. One, because I constantly deployed, so it kept me away from spending money. But two, I think having that disciplined mindset, knowing how much you can spend, and it's not like the military pays, phenomenally, right? Like it doesn't pay the best, so you're already working with a limited amount of funds anyways. But they do give you enough to sustain life while you're doing the country's work. But I think the discipline, the understanding, and one, I think the biggest aspect is being a leader, being able to lead others with their money as well, and give back to soldiers in that way helps you manage your own money. So that's where I think the military could do a better job of teaching financial literacy to leaders because they're the ones that have their hands on soldiers on a day-to-day basis. So I learned more from like my mom, but then I was also able to give back to my soldiers in the military by giving them the information that I had. So if they could dig a little bit deeper into financial literacy, I think it'd be really important. And it's similar to like what I do at Elevate. It's teaching the tools, giving the tools back to those that need it, right? And that goes with finance and it goes with other things too in life or in performance. If you don't have the tools that you need to succeed, then you're never going to succeed. And sometimes those tools come from someone else.
hmm Yeah, that's great. And I'm really excited to kind of get more into Elevate and hear the things you do. This kind of goes along with that from a financial aspect when you're working with, some of these veterans. What would you say is like the biggest mistakes that you see people make with their money, in that situation?
I think it's splurging, right? Splurging when you don't have. Um, I like I said, I grew up in a really frugal household. And I never knew my father, so grew up with a single mom, right? And we didn't have a lot, but we had more than others. So I wouldn't necessarily like I grew up in poverty, but it always felt like we always had because my mom's financial picture was always, no matter how much she made, she always put money to the side. And now, she's retired. She's able to travel. She has, a good retirement for herself because of all the steps that she took along the way. Um, but I think it's hard when you've never had, or even when you have had money, to not spend what's in front of you.
hmm
So my biggest advice to anyone would be if you take it out of your paycheck immediately and it never touches your bank account, then you never see it. So it's never there anyways.
Yeah, yeah. I'm interested to hear because obviously, you kind of mentioned in the military, they kind of prepare you for staying for that 20 years. Do you think that there's people that kind of take that for granted that say like, I'm definitely going to stay for 20 years and maybe don't end up doing that. And maybe they treat their money differently during the time that they're there because they just think automatically, yeah, I'm going to make it to that point and I'll be fine.
I think when I was in, it was very much so like that. Like
Hmm,
people take it for granted that, you have these opportunities or I'm gonna get a retirement at the end of the 20 years anyway, so why do I need to save? Or, luckily we're in a country that also supports us through the veteran affairs programs and everything like that, so you can get disability as well. So I definitely think that that's taken for granted because of the other aspects of disability and retirement that you can get. But now it's different. So you don't, at least when I was transitioning out, they moved away from the typical 20-year pension retirement, and now they go more into like a blended retirement where service members that opted in can now do less of a percentage retirement and more into like 401k or TSP.
hmm
But now if you're coming in, it's all TSP. It's almost like being in corporate America. Like they automatically invest into your TSP, but you also have a responsibility to invest into your own future as well.
Yeah, yeah, understood.
Oscar, I'm just So interested also to hear, you know, what outfit of the military you were in. Can you tell us a little bit about that and where you were deployed? Um, just like to hear that background from
Yeah,
you.
so I predominantly worked in air defense, the air defense artillery. I was not an air defender myself. I was an ordnance person. So I worked in the ISC, the intermediate support element. Basically, for lack of better terms, when it breaks, we fix it. So when the Patriot missile system broke, myself and my team would go out and we would fix anything that's wrong with the system, whether it's the launchers, the radar, the control station. That's what we would be responsible for. And we were deployed to Kuwait, Saudi, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq, Afghanistan. It would just depend on the rotation. I know now they're rotating more into like the more combat related areas, where in the past it was more of like the supporting areas of like Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, the I would say like the nicer areas of the Middle East versus like the more combat driven areas.
It's amazing. So in the military, you know, pressure could be a matter of life or death. You're making split second decisions. You know, whereas with the tech giants, Microsoft, other companies like that, you know, it's sometimes feels like a matter of life or death, but it's not really. It's more about business growth and culture. How do you teach, you know, your executives to develop composure under pressure without losing their perspective?
I think being rooted in who you are, and the military kind of digs that out of you, right? When you join the military, they break you down, right? You're in basic training, they break you down, and you have to like re-identify yourself, for lack of better words. But similar to what I do at Elevate Coaching is I start with the foundation. I have a principle of coaching the person, not the problem. And only because if I help you fix a problem or if I coach you through a problem, you're going to come back when the next problem happens. But I want to give you the tools necessary to never see me again, right? Um, so when I'm teaching executives in the tech world or when I'm coaching executives in the tech world, it's similar concepts. I want to build your foundation so you understand who you are. And you related to culture. Like culture is very important also. Um, but understanding your foundation and your foundational values is critical to be able to understand what is going to hurt, right? And what is going to be easy. And I think that's what most executives find difficult is when they're struggling through a problem, they really don't know why the problem is painful. But when you start to align yourself with your foundational values, you can start to see, well, it doesn't align with who I am. That's why it sucks. Or, man, this is so easy. Or this culture, this company is so easy. Like Microsoft completely aligns with my values. So it makes it really easy to go to work every day. Versus, when I was at AWS, didn't very much so align with my values. So it was difficult to go to work every day. Right.
I kind of wanted, I'd love to hear a little bit more of that and kind of tying it back to your time in the military because I think that when you're switching jobs, right? When I went from being a professional athlete to then in wealth management, I had to almost kind of rewire my brain into how I thought and how I did things. And I think that rewiring took a couple of years, and I think I ended up kind of falling back into some of the same patterns. Some of the things that made me successful before are the things that are creating success for me now. I'd love to hear kind of that with your move from military to tech and now into running your own business.
Well, I think it's similar, Chris. It was very much so I got out of the military and I'm like, I don't want to think about the military at all, right?
Yeah,
And it's probably similar to your journey of you got done being a professional athlete and you're like, man, I don't want to hear about sports for a while.
yeah,
Mhm.
Uh, because of the roller coaster, right? It's really tough to go through all of the experiences you've been through and then, sit back and reflect and not be angry about
yeah.
certain things. And that's what I struggled with a lot was the anger of the deployments I went through, the situations I went through, um, the relationships I lost, the time away from family. Um, so, similar to you, I sat back for years and I was like, I don't want to even, I didn't even tell people that I served. That's kind of where it ended up, right? And it wasn't up until I think like 2023, 2024 when I finally allowed myself to reflect on it and be thankful for like everything that it did for me. I got my bachelor's degree out of the military. It helped me, get my bachelor's. It helped me get my master's. I eventually got my master's from NYU, which I would have never thought that I would have gone to NYU, right? Like I grew up in Odessa, Texas. So it's a small oil town. You've probably heard of it from Friday Night Lights, or I think there's a TV show right now on, I think it's A&E, talk about the oil industry. But I never thought I would go to NYU. But the military helped me do that. So, sitting back and reflecting opened up my eyes to, the military being such a good experience, and now I'm thankful for it, and it's allowed me to jumpstart into business, right? Even into the tech world. And I think Microsoft actually helped with that, is their culture was so positive that it helped me see the past as a positive thing versus a negative thing. And now just being a business owner, I have to rely on my past experiences of the military, of being able to grind and set a schedule and be direct, knowing how to say no, right? And I think that's another thing that, I teach through Elevate Coaching is boundary setting, but
Hmm.
also reflective work, right? Not everything is bad from the past, but everything is a useful learning experience, right? I may look back on my military past and not like certain things, but I learned from it. And so I can't ever lose that. I have to take that with me in my continued growth journey so that I don't make those same mistakes again.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
that's so cool. It's so interesting to hear that because I think I can relate to it, right? It's going from one thing to something completely different and understanding the things you need to take with you and the things that you need to leave behind. Is there anything that you would say like you 100% needed to leave behind? Like for me, I think one of the biggest problems I had when I was playing is it was very difficult for me to separate, my life in baseball versus my life outside of baseball. Like if I had four strikeouts one day, I would go home and be miserable, right? And I learned, I can't be that way. I have to be able to separate my personal life from my professional life. Is there anything like that that you kind of carry with you?
I think in the military, I mean, you're a soldier 24/7, so it's so hard to take that uniform off.
Hmm.
Um, when I got out, I think that reflective work of like just I took the uniform off and decided that I didn't want to have anything to do with it and pushed it all the way into a corner. But oddly enough, I never got rid of my uniform. It still hangs in my closet to this day, thanks to my wife. So, my wife, Sophia, would not allow me to get rid of my uniform. And I thank her for it now because looking back on it, just like you said, I took so many things away from the military that make me who I am today. And I wouldn't be this person without those experiences. So I have to be, in thankful for what I've learned, thankful for what I've been through. And like I alluded to before, it's a growth journey, and I can't sit here and say that the military didn't do anything for me like I used to, right? When I got out of the military, I was like, it didn't do nothing for me. I hate it. I want to walk away from it.
Yep.
But, now I look back and I'm like, I learned a lot. I miss a lot of it. The aspects I miss of it are the leader portion of, constantly being in leadership roles, constantly having influence over soldiers. And I think that's what drove me to really getting into coaching and starting Elevate Coaching is having influence, making a difference. Outside of coaching athletes, coaches, and executives, the one pro bono area that I give back to is helping transitioning veterans. I think it's important because I was a lost veteran when I got out. and I knew what it felt like. So being able to give back to that area, I think is really important because, you know, I hated feeling the way that I felt, and I don't want other service members to feel that way. So I think between taking what I learned, implementing everything, and then understanding that there's positives in the negative is what what I would say is most beneficial from my time spent in the military.
Yeah. That's so insightful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Um, what we do becomes who we are. It's our identity, very hard to separate who we are from what we do. So coming from the military, yes, it takes you a long time to rewire, your thought process, and assume a new role of someone, who do I want to be next? So what tools do you arm those that you coach with to kind of, change their mindset architecture? How do you help people who've been, just in the same role or in the same field and it's their identity, but they have to shift to make the change.
I think as a coach, we ask questions, sometimes the wrong question, right? But the wrong question always leads to the right one. Um, and the tools that I equip people with are tools that they already have inside of them. A lot of it is hesitation. They're scared to ask themselves, or they're fearful to ask themselves the hard questions. Um, Sometimes you probably wouldn't believe it, but at the executive level, it's organization. A lot of it is organization. Somebody organizes for them constantly, right? Somebody manages their calendars. Somebody is setting their meetings for them. So when they get to normal life, when they get out of the job, there's chaos because they don't they don't manage their own time. So when they get out of work, they don't know what's happening. So a lot of that is like organization, right? How do you organize your time? How do you prioritize? I think the biggest tool that I teach in coaching, whether it's to athletes or executives, it's being intentional. How intentional are you with the time that you're setting aside for the things that you want to do, whether that's in work or whether that's in your personal life, in relationships, with your kids? Because to be honest, a lot of the coaching, when it does come to executives, is more about what's going on in life than it is about what's going on at work. And people might not see it, but it bleeds. Life bleeds into work and work bleeds into life. And so another thing that I try to equip is boundary setting, right? You got to be able to have great boundaries in order to be successful in different areas of your life. If you want to be a good father or a good mother, you got to be able to have a boundary with like, hey, work ends at this time. Now I'm going to be intentional in being at home. Or, hey, I took you to school. I have to be at work now. Let me be successful at work. So just being very intentional and, understanding boundaries, I think are the two biggest tools that I teach both athletes and executives.
So what's the biggest difference between those two, right? They're kind of two different areas. And like when we do what we do for people, when we help people with their money, we have to recognize that we're working with a group of young athletes that might be in their 20s, right? That are living a completely different life than Mr. and Mrs. Business Owner who are 55 years old, and their wealth looks a lot different. It might not look different from the outside looking in, but obviously in their lifestyle, it's different. What would you say is the biggest difference when you're coaching, say, an executive versus an athlete?
I wouldn't say that there's differences. I would reframe that to say that there's so many similarities that we all are human to begin with, right? We
Mhm.
all put our pants on the same way. We all wake up and brush our teeth. We all take showers, right? We're all doing the same similar things. And I think when we break away from, you know, trying to find the differences in how everybody is, and more so trying to lean on how similar we are and how our minds work in similar ways. I think that's why I'm able to delve into the athletic sector is because I don't look at it as I'm not an athlete, right? Like I play basketball, but I was not a professional athlete, so I don't know how professional athletes think and feel and navigate the professional sector. But what I do know is I'm a father. I was in the military, so I've experienced similar challenges. You know, when I played sports, I was always told like we're going to war, right? Well, in the military, I went to war, so I have commonalities between the professional sports sector and the military. We use similar terminology: going to war, fighting a battle, camaraderie, teamwork. So there's those similarities, and I try to stick more in, what we have in common than what differentiates us. Because at the end of the day, that's where coaching lives, is finding common ground and common factors versus trying to identify the differences between you and I.
Oscar, have you always had this entrepreneurial spirit? Growing up, was ownership of a business or running your own business something that interested you?
I don't think it necessarily was like top of mind, but when I was younger, like I said, I started like a landscaping business. It wasn't LLC'd or trademarked or anything like that, but I had business cards and I had memberships and I walked around the neighborhood with my lawnmower. But I think I just wanted to make money back then. I was 13 years old. I just wanted to make some extra money. Um, and I would have never thought myself to own a business in adulthood. But when I started Elevate Coaching, I knew that I had a mission to want to give back. And I think that's what made it easy to start a business is I know that foundationally, Elevate Coaching is a business to give back. One, through the knowledge that I've gained, and two, just by helping others feel as good about themselves as how I feel about myself. And that's my like overarching goal is, you know, when a person comes to me and they're struggling, I want them to feel as good as I feel helping them. That's when I feel at my best, is taking everything that I've learned in life and giving back to those that come to me that are struggling. Um, so I think it's I've never wanted to open a business, from childhood or even as an adult, but I knew that I needed to in order to give back the way that I want to.
How did you come up with the name?
So I came up with Elevate Coaching. It's three letters, ELV and the number eight. E is for elevate, L is for lead, and V is for value. The eight is synergistically related to Kobe, just because I was a huge Kobe Bryant fan growing up. If I unblurred it, you'd see I have a Kobe portrait behind me. But the eight is basically just to live the Mamba mentality, to the strive of being one's best self every day. But we start with value, and I'll always go back to values because values is your foundation. And then being a leader and how you lead matters. That's how you build your house, right? The way you lead and how you lead is how you build your house. And we always want to continue to elevate ourselves to bigger and better things. Um, and that eight just is it's the infinity sign. It's just standing upright. But again, that Mamba mentality is just what makes me who I am and how I continue to get better every day is I always look up and I have the Mamba mentality above me. Is just striving to be one's best self every day.
Do you, Oscar, what are your financial goals? Obviously, you've got the tech thing going, you've got your own business. What does financial freedom look like for you?
Oh, I used to say that I wanted to retire at 40. So I'm 37 at the moment. I don't think I'm gonna quite make that goal, but I think the way that I look at financial freedom is being able, if I am, working for a company, it's outside of my own. It's being able to quit if I really want. If somebody really, ticks me off that day, and I have the freedom to say I'm done working. And I think I'll be at that goal around 42, is to be able to work because I want to, not because I have to.
Yeah.
And that's why Elevate Coaching came about. is I started to see my future looking more and more like having the financial freedom to step away from corporate America. So how do I give back? And you can't quote unquote retire till you're 59 and a half. But what do I do in those 18 years, right? If I'm at 42, what am I doing for another 18 years or 16 years? Like, what am I doing? And I'd rather be using that time to give back, but also make money, right? Like you can also do what you love and earn money while doing it too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool to be able to align your values to your work. I once heard somebody say, like, if if money didn't matter, if no one needed money, would you still do your job every day? And I feel like when you can answer that as yes, it's a really cool thing to hear. Sounds like you've gotten that. So
Oscar, you've written about the power of yet when shifting people from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. How can a manager subtly use language to coach their team through a major project or failure?
I think understanding where people are in the moment is the first thing. I think a lot of the times as managers are experiencing setbacks or difficulties, we have a really hard time setting expectations properly for the situation and for the personnel. But when you can sit back and you can understand this is my personnel, this is my situation, maybe my expectations aren't aligned with where my team can go, you can start to drive larger impact. I think as difficulties happen, the setbacks happen, or even when you're just trying to accomplish the day to day, when you're driving your team to too high of expectations, you get less done. But when you can sit there and align yourself to each person and what you can expect from them, and it's cohesive, right? You can also go to each person and say, this is what I think I can expect from you. Does this align? And I think sometimes that conversation is missing with leaders. It's immediately going to, hey, this is what I expect from you. But it's not a two-way street. It's a one-way street from manager to subordinate. But when you bring in that second layer of asking, hey, I expect this, does this align? Right? Then I think you can start to get more done. And one thing that the military taught me too is caring about the person, right? And I also talk about that like coach the person, not the problem. The reason that comes up in me is because for me to truly be a leader, for any leader to truly be a leader, I have to care about you as a person. If I don't care about you as a person, I'm never going to get the most out of you that I can. So, in the coaching journey and coaching executives and athletes, but mainly coaches, like other athletic coaches, that's where I talk about that a lot is how well do you know your personnel? And not just this guy is a corner three shooter, or this guy is a great third down running back, or this guy is a good DH, right? That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for what's their family situation like. I think the biggest example right now is like Luka Doncic. I think in the NBA he struggled, right? Because he's going through family issues. His kids are in another country. Like that impacts athletes a lot, but understanding that as a coach is super beneficial to like getting the most out of your players, or getting the most out of your personnel in work too. So, being able to differentiate those things, but at the same time understanding who your player is, who your personnel is as a whole, is going to be able to lead you towards the biggest amount of success imaginable.
That's so
yeah,
true. So true. It's the context, right? It's not just this person that you see at face value, who knows, like you said, what's going on in their life, their family, what happened that morning, or
Yeah.
things from the past that, creep up. I mean, we're all human. This happens to everyone. And it's more of a matter of knowing that person, and trying to help them from there and understanding their situation. We're all
Yeah.
different. We all come with lots of strengths and weaknesses, and it's a matter of kind of putting that puzzle together. Um, and so well said that, yeah, caring. Caring is important. We forget about that.
I love the way that you explain, like, coach the person, not the problem. That's something that I work on in my own life. I'm very, results oriented, right? I want to come up with an answer, right? If my wife says this is wrong, I'm like, okay, I want to fix it, right? Do you get kind of pushback from the people that you work with, at least in the beginning? I'm assuming a lot of them say, I've got this problem, how do I fix it? Do they push back on you and kind of say, I'd rather just fix the problem?
It is. It's always a lot of pushback. Well, I think the misconception in coaching is that I will solve your problems for you,
Mhm.
right? Or like I'm an advice giver. Coaches, I dabble in advice, but I more so want to really lean on asking you the right questions because you already know the answer, right? That person, that client, they know the answer. I just need to pull it out of them. I need to ask them the right question to where their brain goes, wow, aha, that's what I've been looking for. And I feel like that's more powerful than me giving you an answer or me giving you advice. I've been through a lot in my life, through the military, through defense contracting, through the tech world. But if I give you the answer, the next time something happens, you're going to come back and want another answer. But
Yeah.
what's more valuable to you? If I can ask the right questions, lead you to a place where you have the answer for yourself, man, the next time you have a problem, you're gonna always lean back. I will always be on your mind. Funny enough, I'll always be in every client's mind because they can always sit back and say, wow, I remember Oscar asked me that question. Let me ask myself that question now so that I don't have to go back for coaching again because you already have the tools. I equip you with the tools to excel, to succeed, not just to solve this one problem. It's for holistically your life, your performance in sports and executive, functioning. It doesn't matter. Like I just want to give you the tools in order to succeed in every aspect of your life.
Would you say that is the underlying common thread with people that you coach? They're looking for the solution, and really it's something that has to come from within.
I do think so. I do think at times a lot of clients come in and they don't really know which way to go, but that's why they're there, right? And so being able to take my military experience to understand how they're feeling about certain things, and then, taking tech and coaching in the second part of my life, um, to be a good listener. Because in the military, I was not a good listener. I was okay, go do this, right? Like you're charged with different demands in life and different demands on the field that sometimes you have to just point and they go that way. But as I got out of the military and I got into coaching, I had to become a really good active listener. And so the more I listen, the more I understand. And so when clients come in and they are stuck in those places, I can hear the frustration, hear the anxiety, the stress, and call it out. Sometimes, JT, when you're going through something, I need to also ask you a question like, hey, I see you're stressed, or I see this brings you a lot of anxiety. What's bringing that? What's causing that? To sit back and reflect on that makes a huge difference in a person when they're trying to find answers to things, as opposed to, hey, this is how you fix this. Or when I was in a situation like that, this is what I did. That doesn't take away the anxiety and the stress. But if I sit back and I ask you that question, you might reflect on it and be like, dang, okay, well, this is what's bringing the stress, or this is what's bringing anxiety. Then we can find the root cause. once we find the root cause, we can work on a solution together, but it's your solution, not mine.
That resonates with me because a lot of the times it's not, the necessary task at hand, but it's more of just your heightened sense of everything all of the
Hmm.
time, right? Kind of like a dog wagging their tail all the time. It's just like, and you have to, right, you have to find the root, figure that out, push that noise out of the way to execute and get things done, which if you're in a lather, it's not easy.
Yeah, no, it's not. And, just a fun fact, I once learned that anxiety is the worry of the future or of what's to come, and stress or depression is the worry of what has happened in the past.
Mm,
So living in the present is the most beneficial thing you can do.
wow. Wow, Oscar.
Like being a
Dropping
psych, I
nuggets.
we joke, right? JT, we joke all the time, like, what do we do in wealth management? Well, like 95% of the time, we're just a psychiatrist, right? We're there
Yeah.
for our people. And it sounds like it's the same for you, right? You're coaching, but you're kind of a sounding board, right? You're there
Yeah,
to help them figure out that they, like you said, they already know the answers to this. They just need to, follow their intuition.
yeah, exactly. And, I think question asking and like I said, as a coach and at Elevate Coaching, I think we ask the question you refuse to ask yourself,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
that's what brings out like the true, authentic answer that you really have been missing.
All right. So, Oscar, one question that we like to ask every guest on our podcast is, what does sweat equity mean to you?
What can we pull out of the smallest or most difficult place, either within ourselves, within our finances, um, or any aspect of our lives. There's ways to gain from everything that we do, but how do we do it without trying, right? Like the sweat that I view it like this, the sweat is wasted, right? That's something that we wipe on a towel or that falls to the floor, but how do we catch that? How do we not waste the sweat that we pour into everything that we do, whether it's in money, if it's in professional athletes, if it's in your job sector, like how do we not waste things that are coming out?
Oscar, thank you so much for joining us today on our Self Equity podcast. We appreciate you sharing your journey, helping us, arming us with some of the skills that you arm your athletes, entertainers, executives, entrepreneurs with. And again, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your service. We really appreciate everything that you've done, and we hope to do this again soon.
Thank you, JT and Chris.
You got it.
The views expressed in this podcast are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views of Stewart Partners or its affiliates. This podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered investment, legal, or tax advice or a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any security or investment strategy. Information discussed is obtained from sources believed to be reliable. However, accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. All investments involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Past performance does not guarantee future results, and any forward-looking statements or market projections are subject to change and may not occur. Please consult your financial, legal, or tax professional regarding your individual circumstances before making any decisions. Securities are offered through Stewart Partners Investment Solutions, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered through Stewart Partners Investment Advisory, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Stewart Partners Investment Solutions, Stewart Partners Investment Advisory, and Stewart Partners Global Advisory are affiliated companies collectively referred to as Stewart Partners.